Hey guys, it's Truth is Unpopular. My name is Tyler Honorchek, and this is the second in the series, Did God Save Wars? Alright, so for this video, what I wanted to talk to you about was time. Specifically, dates on a calendar. Currently, I think you're well aware of how our January through December calendar works. And if you don't know, it's the Gregorian calendar system. Anyways, I think you know what are important dates on those. Like birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, paydays, vacation, whatever. But for this video, what I wanted to talk to you about was, does God also have a calendar system with dates on it that he finds important, that he'd like you to be a part of? And what I'd like to show you is that you do find this, and you find it listed in Leviticus 23. Now, before I go there, if you've seen my other video, Christmas and Easter with Jeroboam, you'd know that I still believe the feasts are important days that God asks us to be a part of. So if you go to Leviticus 23, what you see at the top is God is describing, or getting ready to describe, that these are my feast days, my appointed times, my holy convocations. That word behind that is the word moed. It just means my appointed times. It's kind of his expected. But that word is the Strong's number 4150. So in Leviticus 23, the very first moed listed is the Sabbath. And I think a lot of people will think of Saturday or Sunday. If you're Jewish, Messianic, seventh day, Saturday is Sabbath. If you're regular church, Sunday is Sabbath. Well, the next Sabbath, or the next moed listed in Leviticus 23 is the Passover. And Passover is given a specific date, which is the 14th of the first month. Now I'm going to stop there because this is kind of the crux of the whole video. That word month is somewhat of a deceptive translation. That word month should be translated new moon, because the word behind it is Kadesh, and it's 2320 in Strong's. So right there we have a discrepancy. For us, our calendar system is strictly just a 12th of the year. For God, calendar system is driven by new moons. So every new moon would be a new cycle. Now this can be also backed up, the law first mentioned in Exodus, when he says the sun and moon are appointed for times and seasons. So right there is kind of the crux of this whole thing, like I said, because man's system and God's system work differently. So we're going to get through that and show you here, and hopefully prove to you that the moon is indeed tied with the moed. Well, the next moed in Leviticus 23 is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This falls on the 15th to the 21st of the first moon. The next moed is the Feast of First Fruits, which falls on the 22nd of this first moon. Right after that, you've got Shavuot, or more commonly known Pentecost, which is typically 50 days after First Fruits. But I'd like to show you on the calendar system, as this doesn't quite work, and if you actually read it, it seems to indicate a slightly different count, because it says to count 7 full Sabbaths and then 50 days. But if you hang with me, I'd like to show that to you. Our next moed falls in the 7th moon on the first day, and this is trumpets. After that, on the 10th of that 7th moon, we have the Day of Atonement, followed by, on the 15th of the 21st, the Feast of Tabernacles. So, what I'd like to show is, as I've said, is the moon is indeed a part of the calendar system. So if you go to Psalms 104:19, it says the moon is appointed for the moed. If you go to Numbers 10:10 and Psalms 81:3, it asks that you blow a trumpet on the new moon, so just something special to do. In Numbers 28:11, you find that there are special offerings that are different than typical Sabbath or other days. You also see In 2 Chronicles, the story of Solomon builds a temple, and he dedicates it for feast days, new moons, and Sabbaths. So 3 distinct things. A couple chapters later, 2 Chronicles 8:13 says he also commanded the offerings prescribed by Moses be done specifically for Sabbaths, new moons, and feast days. Later in history, if you know the story of Nehemiah, when he's rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem, he also brings back the ordinances for feast days, new moons, and Sabbaths. So again, just to restore. Well, if we go all the way to the millennial reign, and we see this in Isaiah 66:23, it says God says, they will come before me and worship before me from one new moon to the next. So clearly, to me, this is indicative of God restoring the new moon with his calendar system. So maybe, maybe we ought to look into this. And then in Colossians 2:16, Paul asks not to judge those for, doing the new moon. And then you might ask, okay, well, why are we not doing anything by the moon? Well, Hosea 2:11 and Lamentations 2:6 specifically says that God said to Israel, I will cause you to forget your new moons, your Sabbaths, and your feast days. So then you might say, well, but the Jews and all, we haven't really lost all those, right? I mean, we're still kind of doing the Moed. We're still doing Sabbath. And to a degree, yes. But I would say we're doing them wrong. And if you didn't know, the Jewish calendar system right now is driven by what is called the Hillel system. Well, the Hillel system has these 4 rules of postponement. And these 4 rules of postponement are to avoid the Moed feasts conflicting with Saturday Sabbaths. And I would ask you to find those rules of postponement written in the Bible. I don't believe you will find them. So I guess, this is kind of further proof. I think it says in the end time knowledge would increase. Well, I don't think he was talking about technology, internet, whatever. I think he was talking about things pertaining to him, such as, his Moed, his calendar system, and all these things. Well, to kind of show that we're still kind of keeping up with this, but not. Before I show the calendar, I guess I'd like to just kind of point out, Passover, Easter. Now, I don't do Easter, but anyways, typically Passover, Easter typically falls between March and April. And you might ask why that is. Well, that's because it's driven by the moon. But it's also driven by the Hillel calendar system. So what you might not realize is every so often the feast days are actually slightly off from the new moon. And this is because the Hillel calendar can shift the start of a new moon by up to 2 days. So, typically, sometimes Hillel's right on, sometimes it's off by a couple of days. But anyway, so now I'd like to kind of get in and show you how I believe the calendar system works.
So I've got here just a typical new moon cycle where we've got the new moon and then the 6 work days and Sabbath. So the way this kind of works is you've got first, the new moon kicks off on the first day. Then you've got 6 work days followed by Sabbath. And this repeats, and then a Sabbath. Repeats, Sabbath, repeats. So you have 4 work weeks on a new moon calendar. So what I want to show is kind of how this works. So the new moon kicks off with just a sliver. So as soon as this event happens, the priest is supposed to blow a trumpet, signifying the start of the new moon. Well, after that, then you have your 6 working days. And then the 8th day, you have a Sabbath. Well, on the new moon, this will be 1/2. So you can tell in the sky by the shape. So then this repeats again, the 6 working days to the 15th. This will be a full moon. And then again, for the 3rd week, on the 22nd, you have another half moon. This time on the other side. Then repeating for the 29th to where you have just a sliver, possibly nothing. Now, one of the, oddities of the new moon cycle is once in a while you will have a 30th day. So what happens is on the 30th, 29th to 30th, so we've got we have 29, 30, and then again a 1 for the next new moon. So it might fall something like this, where you have just the sliver. Needs to go away. 30th will remain fully dark, and then I guess it'd be the other side, but whatever. Something like this. So this 30th day, it's not really a work day. I think it's treated as like a new moon day. But anyways, I just wanted to show just a simple generic new moon calendar. Well, if I switch, so I've got the entire year where I've got hold up a second. I've got new moons marked off with the yellow, so we got all the way up through to the 12th moon, and with the lunar cycle, because it's not exactly 365 or whatever, every couple years there is a 13th moon added. So if I go back up to the top, we've got the same Sabbath on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29, repeating. And for this example, what I did is I'm ignoring the 30 days, and that'll be apparent here in a little bit. So also on here, I have marked feast days. So we've got Passover, unleavened bread, which goes this whole week, first fruits. You will see Shavuot, or Pentecost, is missing from here. But we also have trumpets, Day of Atonement, then tabernacles. So typically what happens is, I guess what we've been taught is Shavuot or Pentecost is a straight count of 50 after first fruits. Well, if you do that, I'd like to show you that it doesn't quite work out with the way prescribed in Leviticus 23. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 14, 17, 21, 24, 28, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 1, 3, 4, 47, 48, 49, 50. Now, if we go back and read it, it says that we're to count 7 complete Sabbaths and then 50 days. Well, some maybe interpret that as 7 Sabbaths is 49 days and the next 50 days. However, if it says to complete Sabbath on a lunar calendar, I'll show you how this does not work. So 7 Sabbaths after first fruits. So you've got 1, new moons do not count. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we did not complete a 7th Sabbath on the 15th. So to me, this doesn't line up. So what I believe is we're to count after this day 50 days. So complete 7 full Sabbaths and then count. Interestingly enough, if you recall, the 15th is a full moon. So if we count, let's switch colors. So, and regarding potential, I guess before I go on, this is the reason why I kept it at the 29. So best case scenario, we can only ever make it to 14 of the third moon. But if worst case, we had a 30th day on the first moon and the second moon, that would put us back 12th. So our range really is on just a straight 50. It's the 12th through the 14th. So now that we count 7 complete Sabbaths, let's see where we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 9, 1, 3, 48, 49, 50. So again, this is 2 moons where we could potentially have a 30. So our range should be from the 5th, 6th, and 7th of this 5th moon would be shoveled, depending upon if we had to add a 30th day. So then, fortunately, after all this, the others fall pretty easy. You got trumpets on the 7th, and then atonement, and then tabernacles.
All right, so that's how I believe the calendar system works. What I'd like to show you that while Passover through tabernacles, we kind of agree is driven somewhat by the moon, although it is driven by this Hillel offset, and thus can be somewhat off. What I'd like to add is that Sabbath is indeed a moed, and indeed then driven by date-specific times on the new moon calendar. And you can find this in the story of Exodus, the Exodus account, with 3 moons in a row where it lists, like on the calendar I just showed, Sabbaths on 8, 15, 22, 29. So if you go to Exodus 12, God says, okay, this is your first moon. And now how to calculate first moon is something I still need to look into, and maybe have a video for that later. But anyway, so he says this is your first moon, and Passover's 14th. Unleavened bread, which starts with the Holy Convocation, is on the 15th. And that Holy Convocation would indicate Sabbath, which puts 8, 22, 29 as Sabbath days. So our first moon concretely has Sabbaths on 8, 15, 22, 29. Well, we go on to Exodus 16, and we are now into the second moon of the Exodus account. And we see that Israel rise in the wilderness of Sin on the 15th. Now, if you continue reading, you see that the people grumbled against Moses about food. Moses goes before God. God says, okay, starting tomorrow, for next 6 days, gather bread extra on the 6th for the 7th. So this concretely puts a Sabbath on the 22nd. Thus, 8, 15, and 29 are Sabbaths. So 2 moons in a row with 8, 15, 22, 29 Sabbaths. So date-specific Sabbaths. We continue on to the third moon of the Exodus account in Exodus 19. It says, on the same day that Israel arrived in the wilderness of Sin, they camp before God at the mountain, and Moses goes up before the Lord. And the act of Moses going up before the Lord seems to indicate to me kind of a Sabbath, thing. So I would put, again, 8, 15, 22, 29, and Sabbath. So we have 3 moons with Sabbath as date specific. Now this doesn't happen on our current Gregorian calendar system. Because if you go back to 2020, and you were to look at all the different Sabbaths, Saturday Sabbaths, you'd find that they fell on first of the month, second of the month, third of the month, fourth of the month, all the way up to 31st of the month, which is indicative of Sabbaths being in no way tied to a specific date. Well, if you think back to the counter system, one thing in the Bible you'll not find is anywhere that they list a Sabbath day or it's inferred the date, it's going to always fall 8, 15, 22, 29. And just another kind of proof that the 15th, which is new moon, we saw on the calendar, is tied with the Moeds. Because if you go back to Psalms 81:3, you find that we're to also blow a trumpet at the full moon, which is the word Kesa, and that's Strong's 3677. Well, if you remember, we have two feasts that start on holy convocations. And those are unleavened bread in the first moon on the 15th, and tabernacles in the 7th moon on the 15th. And both, well, the counter systems start on full moons. So just kind of another tie-in with the moon system. So I guess what I'm hoping this video does is show you that, okay, we can kind of agree that we're somewhat keeping Passover through tabernacles tied with the moon, but Sabbath is also tied with them. And some people will be like, well, isn't this system kind of, haphazard and chaotic? Well, kind of, if your basis is our current counter system. But as we can see, this is not God's counter system. So, which is your authority calendar system? Is it God's or man's? Well, if you put man's above God's, well, yeah, it's going to, be somewhat chaotic on that counter system. But if you look at God's counter system, it's actually a quite elegant system. I mean, you can be driving down the road and, at night or whatever. If you look up at the moon, say it's one of the quarters, or a full moon, you can go, oh, wow, it's, the 8th or the 15th or 22nd, whatever you see up in the sky. So it's kind of this elegant system that you can look to the heavens and see what day it is. Whereas, man, you got to kind of know and keep track of, well, Saturday was then 7 days ago, and now I can do this. But I guess I'm hoping that this gave you some food for thought. Maybe go look into it some more. But I'm hoping that it can show you that God's counter system and man's don't jive. And man's counter system is not driven by the moon, and it's thrown out pretty much. But God's was originally designed to be a part of it. So thanks for sticking with me. This is Truth is Unpopular.